Hi people, Moreno Ravenberg here again. In this segment of Storytime, I'll be discussing, in essence, forest spirits or spirits that reside in the jungle or in backwoods and whatnot. I'm gonna dive right into it. And before I continue, I need to state that any interesting thing that I might come across, I'll be placing that in the description below. But I'm recording this video first. And I don't think I'll be finding anything of interest, but if I still do, please check the link in the description below just to be sure. I might have something that might be of interest, such as an article or anything like that that comes down to a source or anything of interest whatsoever, okay, whether it be audio or video wise, that you can see in the description below. Let's get down to it. Let me just be blunt. A lot of spirits take up refuge in the jungle or in the forest. It was the case, like I said in previous videos regarding story time that fall under story time before, that there were a lot of hauntings and there were a lot of spirits back in the day when there was no street lighting. So you can imagine what it looked like back then. At night time, the world looked like it was completely covered in darkness. And people were also, at least within my local vicinity, people were very active occult-wise. They were more active from a positive as well as from a negative perspective. That back in those days, people still had, some semblance of self-worth, but society has declined on a not just locally, also on a global level. Moral decline is at an all-time high. I mean, back in the day, at the very least locally, you could do things like leave your door open. You could trust your neighbors, but nowadays, if you are stupid enough or ignorant enough or just nonchalant to leave your door open here locally, I can guarantee you that within 5 minutes to 15 minutes, strangers will be in your house looking for stuff that they can take away or carry away. Believe me, if you don't value your if you don't value your furniture or anything like that, like my house for example, I can leave the front door open, I can leave the front gate open, and I can just, I can take a flight abroad, and if I come back in a month's time, I can guarantee you that the entire house is empty. The entire house is empty and trash, and if you're not careful, people will squat here. The place will become a squatter's hub. I don't know whether there's going to be junkies or anything. Bottom line is that, people were decent compared to now. They were decent back then. They had some semblance of self-worth and a certain amount of integrity, and something that you couldn't buy, whereas nowadays people are disposable in the sense that you can buy and sell their sorry asses. And like I said in previous videos before, hauntings were at an all-time high back then too, because spirits are generally speaking nocturnal. I also did a separate video on that, so it's easier for them to come out at night or to be active at night, despite the fact that they're also active during the day, but not as active, which is normal. I mean, most of us, anyone that's watching this, you'll see for yourself when you're dead. The moon deals with the night. That's why the moon rules the night. And the moon is one of the most clairvoyant of the 7 classical planets, the sun, the moon, Mars, Mercury, etc., etc. The moon is the most clairvoyant planet, okay? It's a planet that you go to for anything of an astral nature. That's because everything also has to go through the astral plane. So the moon, everything has to go through the moon in order to manifest in physical reality. In any case, hauntings were an all-time high back then, when it was pitch dark outside. And whereas nowadays, with artificial lighting and the unpleasant elements of societal congestion in big cities, a lot of spirits that, generally speaking, spirits also want peace. A lot of them that want peace have retreated back into the jungle or in isolated, quiet areas where almost no person can be seen or found. You name it, anything from abandoned buildings in abandoned locations, just places that no one cares about really, or that people don't go en masse. And as a result, if you're someone that finds yourself in these areas for whatever reason, for example, you're a lumberjack, or you are a guide, a jungle guide, or you're a hunter, you like to go hunting in the jungle and in the swamps and whatnot, then yeah, don't be surprised if in your so-called career, if you're someone that does it on a frequent or regulatory basis, that you come across things that you can explain rationally. I mean, even the most mundanest or most atheistic, die-hard unbelievers or disbelievers have encountered things that they can't explain right away. And yeah, this is nothing short of common. I have come across plenty of sources that have stated that, for example, hunters, I've read plenty of stories, confirmed, legitimate stories of hunters locally, for example, that went into the jungle and they got lost. I read a story, for example, one source stated that he went into the jungle with a couple of friends and the party split up at a certain point. I think it was 4 people, and they split up into 2 parties of 2. And one party got completely lost because they shot what they thought was a deer, but it was a forest spirit in disguise. And despite the fact that they weren't even far away from civilization, maybe 10 kilometers or something, and 10 kilometers from the main road, and despite the fact that they knew the area like the back of their hands, they still got lost. And one of them told the story too, that when he was asleep, he had a scary dream because they had to sleep in the jungle. Of course, they had to stay the night while they tried to find their way out. And while he was asleep, he had a scary dream about some huge black entity that said to him, "Why'd you shoot me? This is my territory, this is my domain, and you guys are trespassing. As punishment for trespassing as well as shooting me, I'm going to see to it that you guys stay lost in the jungle for 2 full days, and I'll let you go after 2 days." And that's exactly what happened. This isn't just one story. I've read multiple stories over the course of my lifetime. And keep in mind that these are only stories locally, let alone if you were to include the rest of the world. But yeah, that's a common phenomenon of a drifter spirit that takes up refuge in the jungle, or a jungle or forest spirit that makes it so that people get lost. And you can have the most modern of equipment. You can have Google Maps with you, GPS, whatever modern technological appliance you have with you, nothing is going to work. You can have hunting dogs with you that know the area so well, ridiculously too. Doesn't matter whether you've been there 100 times, you're gonna get lost. And how does that happen? The thing is that a forest spirit traps you in a time vacuum, basically a time portal, and you will not be able to find your way out. You'll notice that, for example, you'll keep walking in circles. You'll keep coming across the same tree that you went past 10 times already. And it doesn't matter, even if it's in your backyard. I read a different story, for example, a different source stated that a local farmer that went hunting right behind his house, we're talking about 50 meters behind his house, he could still hear the radio. His wife likes to listen to the radio, and usually she put the radio on full blast in one of those old-timey radios, a ghetto blaster. And he said that he was so close to home that he could even hear the radio. He could hear that ghetto blaster. And nevertheless, he was unable to find his way back. He went into the jungle, into his backyard at 11 a.m. in the morning. And he only managed to find his way back at 5 p.m. in the afternoon. After a good deal of trouble, and he was with his dogs, but even his dogs acted completely flabbergasted and confused and dumbfounded. And he discussed the matter with a neighbor only after a couple of months, and that neighbor told him, or someone that lived in the region, and that person told him that the area where he went to, that specific part of his backyard that he went to, that patch of land or that forest, there is a forest spirit there that likes to pester people, that likes to bully people by trapping them in a time vacuum so that they get lost for an unspecified amount of time. So yeah, this is a common phenomenon. A different story that I'm going to discuss is also of malevolent forest spirits. I've heard this from hunters too. I'm talking about, I knew people physically, that people I was friends with, or people that at least I was on good terms with, acquaintances, whatever you want to call them, that I spoke to and discussed the matter with, and they told me they told me that, hey, that's what happened and so on and so forth, because they also went hunting. These are hunters. They're either casual hunters or semi-professional hunters, but they use primitive equipment. And another thing that I'm going to discuss too, before I get on to the malevolent nature of forest spirits, or forest spirits that can be evil in nature, is, like I already stated, forest spirits like to camouflage themselves, with the first story of course. Forest spirits also like to camouflage themselves. They basically blend in with their environment the same way that a chameleon blends in with its environment, because they want to stand out as little as possible. Usually these are spirits that want nothing, like I said, most of them, they want nothing but peace. They want to live in peace, they want to exist in peace, and therefore, if they've been in the jungle for an unspecified amount of time, it could be a short while to an intermediary while. The bottom line is that if they've been there for a while, that they automatically take on the moniker, or they disguise themselves, better said, as a deer or any other mundane forest animal, either a forest rabbit, but usually they mask themselves as deer, as basically a deer that you hunt on, as fawn. And yeah, I've heard numerous stories, confirmed stories of hunters, for example, shooting that deer and that bullet going straight through that deer, and several other things happening. The person that I was friends with that went into the jungle, he told me he hunts on a regulatory basis, on a frequent basis, and he also told me the story which involved him spotting a deer at night time. Most animals are nocturnal, so just an FYI for those of you that don't know. Usually hunting is something that you're supposed to do at night time, because a lot of animals are in the jungle are nocturnal, so they come out at night, or at the very least in the morning time before the sun comes up, so before dawn. But you'll have difficulty finding or spotting animals during the day, because the majority of them go hide and they simply sleep during the day. They're nocturnal. In any case, this hunter friend of mine, this former hunter friend of mine, he spotted a deer, he told me, and it was nighttime, and he was wearing a hard hat with a built-in flashlight, of course. And he said that he came across a deer, but he noticed right away that it was nothing like any deer he had ever seen. It was unlike any other deer that he had seen, because he said that this deer looked really different from all the other deer. For starters, it had, instead of just a general hide or general skin, it had something extra. It was like a layer of feathers or something. And his reaction was like, what the fuck am I looking at? And he took aim to shoot that deer, but he also noticed other things, small things that basically added up to the conclusion that, this isn't a deer. And it startled him somewhat. The average person, when seeing something like that, the average hunter that doesn't have an occult mind the way that I do, will be spooked, will be honestly scared shitless, more or less. And he wasn't literally scared shitless, but he was spooked, he told me. And he said that he noticed other small things too while taking aim at that deer. Usually he says that whenever a deer is caught in your headlight, the built-in flashlight that you have in your hard hat that most hunters wear, if you move from side to side really slow, that deer will also move its eyes, because it's blinded by the light and it follows the light. Its eyes follow the light source. But he says this deer, it doesn't matter what he did, it doesn't matter which movement he made, whatever he did, that deer did not move, it didn't blink, it didn't do a single thing. If the wind blew briefly or similar, those so-called feathers or hairs or whatever was on that deer's skin as an extra add-on, they didn't even move or anything. And he said that that's when he realized that it wasn't a deer. And he slowly backed away, and he just tailed it out of there. He just left the area as soon as possible. I've also read and heard of other accounts, confirmed legitimate accounts, that, for example, a hunter shoots a deer that in reality is a forest spirit, and he either gets sick, severely sick, or a family member or a relative of his dies. And it's only when he goes back home after maybe a week, after scouring the jungle looking for fair game to hunt on and prey upon, that he arrives at home and he hears that a family member of his is deceased, or he comes to find that his wife is deceased, and so on. So those are things that can happen, okay? Usually these forest spirits, when confronted, despite the fact that they're peaceful, when they're confronted in an aggressive manner by whomever the aggressor is, well, but usually if it's a human being, you can bet that something's going to happen, some kind of misfortune will befall you. Usually nothing happens if the bullets just pass through that deer. You'll know that, this isn't a living human being. I mean, this isn't a living creature. This isn't a deer in any case. You'll know that it's some kind of spirit, and you'll immediately retreat. You'll leave that animal alone, that spirit alone. But other times, if you do manage to kill that spirit, what you basically did, so let's just say the occult mechanism behind all of it is usually if you were to kill that deer, what you did is you killed its physical body. You killed the body that it managed to either occupy, so it either occupied the regular deer that was already there or close to death, and it basically regenerated it while taking refuge in it, or it simply created it from energy, a physical body from energy, which is not easy to do, believe me. But regardless, if you kill that, then you basically killed its physical body, and you better believe it's going to be pissed. It's like if you were to tear the clothes off of my back, I'm going to get pissed like no other. And I'm gonna ask you what the fuck do you think you're doing, and I'm gonna get angry. And it's the same thing with these astral entities. It's the same thing with these forest spirits or these jungle spirits. And they're going to retaliate by either killing a family members of yours the exact same moment that you shoot their physical body, the body that they occupy, that deer's body, for example, or some other misfortune is going to befall you. And yeah, that is it for forest spirits that mask themselves as animals, as wild animals. I'm going to close off this specific part. I'm not done yet. This specific part. This video is going to be a bit longer, by the way, because there are plenty of forest spirit occurrences. So I've got a good deal of ground to cover. But I'm done with this section in any case. Another thing that I'm going to mention is that forest spirits, another common animal that forest spirits also like to appear as or mask as is a snake. Usually they love, a lot of forest spirits like to take on the appearances of python snakes. And I've read plenty of stories of people that mistakenly killed a python snake, but they didn't know it was a spirit, of course. And they kill that python snake, and that spirit simply retaliates by killing them or driving them insane, by damaging them so severely mentally that they just lose their minds. They end up in the loony bin, they end up in a mental asylum, you name it. That's also very common. There are other occurrences of people, for example, let's just say tribesmen or tribes outright worshipping these snakes because they know that they're not regular snakes, but that they're spirits that simply disguise themselves as snakes, and they simply petition that spirit the same way an occultist like me works with the spirit, but it's different. They worship that spirit as if it's their supreme being, like it's their god, and they simply make offerings to it and they appease it in whatever way in exchange for usually the village's general well-being or protection or anything that you can think of that you petition an entity for, prosperity, fertility, you name it, whatever. And yeah, those are the only two appearances that come to mind. Keep in mind that this is the case in general, but it's also possible that in exceptional cases a spirit will take on any other shape that you can imagine. Maybe a tiger, a lion, but these are very unlikely, very, very unlikely. Usually, at the very least locally, that I'm extensively knowledgeable on, it's deer and snakes, that specifically python snakes, that forest spirits like to disguise themselves as, or they like to manifest as such. So yeah, now I'm going to move on to the really malevolent side of forest spirits. And keep in mind what I said, okay, usually the spirits that disguise themselves, they'll leave you alone as long as you leave them alone. If you enter their habitat and they feel threatened and you're infringing on them and their territory, then only then will they retaliate. But usually they'll steer clear of you, and it's also advised that you steer clear of them. unless you deliberately want to provoke them with the negative consequences, as I mentioned. But now I'm going to discuss spirits that are outright malevolent. You usually have also, spirits that can be just evil in nature for whatever reason. They themselves have experienced pain and agony, or whatever the reason may be. Bottom line is that you also have forest spirits or jungle spirits that are malevolent in nature, that will outright try to kill you or try to grossly deform you if you come across them, and vice versa. Only one account comes to mind of a group of hunters, and it involves a father taking his 13 or 12-year-old son with him alongside his hunter friends. This, keep in mind, this is a local occurrence, and the son is the one telling this story, okay? And I'm sorry, not his father, his grandfather. The grandson is telling the story. He went hunting with his grandfather and a couple of his granddad's buddies, so his grandfather's friends, and they went hunting, and they simply left him behind in a certain part of the forest, a safe part obviously. And they said, we'll be back in a second, we're just going to do recon, so we're going to do reconnaissance, we're going to scour the area. We're going to scout the area to see exactly what we can find, or if there are any potential animals nearby. And the grandson he stated that he heard, the snapping of twigs of someone come close by when he was just doing something to relieve boredom, playing with sticks and whatnot. And he couldn't believe what he saw. He saw an entity approach him, that took on a severely grotesque appearance. I mean, he simply said that he saw a woman walk towards him, but this woman was ridiculously ugly. For one, she was unappealing, unattractive, and her legs were backwards. So yeah, can you try to imagine that? Her legs were backwards, so her entire knees and everything, the back of her feet. So this was backwards, and she walked forwards with that kind of with those kind of limbs. So keep that in mind. And the son, of course, was terrified, but he was too dumbfounded. He was too startled to actually succumb to fear. And that quote unquote woman approached him and asked him, who you here with? And he truthfully just said that I'm here with my grandfather and a couple of his hunting buddies. They went to scout the area. And she said, okay, tell them that I'll pay them a visit this evening at nighttime. And it's when the party came back that he told them, and his grandfather believed him. His grandfather's buddies didn't. They were of the opinion that he was just a child, so he either made up some shit or he just, he just made something up in his boredom, but they didn't believe him. But his grandfather did believe him because it's his grandson, and he knows, hey, my grandson doesn't make up stuff like that. And usually when hunters go into the jungle, they just sleep on the ground. They create an open patch of land or similar, and they just sleep either in hammocks or they sleep on the ground. But bottom line is that, that's what hunters do. And the grandfather did not want to sleep along with his grandson after hearing that story. And he built a tree hut, and they went to sleep in that tree hut. So the grandfather was the grandson. They went to sleep in that tree hut, and they simply kicked that ladder over so that no one could climb into that tree hut easily. And the next morning they woke up, and to their horror, they found that the other hunters were all decapitated. All of them were missing their heads. Not literally decapitated, but they were just missing their heads. All of the hunters that had slept on the ground or in hammocks had literally lost their head. They were simply, they had their heads removed. End of story. Not decapitated as in someone chopped it off. They literally just had no heads. This area of their neck was just consistent of flesh, but they didn't have any heads in any case. And yeah, I did like this story. I like this story because of its gruesomeness, and the grandson closes off the story by saying, or by stating, that They immediately sought help, of course. They went back into town and they notified the authorities, and the authorities carried out a significantly lengthy research. They investigated the matter at length, but nothing came of it. They never found the so-called culprit. But the reason for that is obvious. And this is an example of, a severely malevolent entity, or an entity that has evil intentions. And yeah, another example that I can come up with is, for example, if you go into the jungle and you find an area that's completely neat and completely clean, it should definitely ring alarm bells, okay? Doesn't have to be the case that a haunting, that there's a jungle or forest spirit nearby, but it is something that you should keep in mind, not to be superstitious or anything like that. You should feel relaxed, but just imagine that. I have read accounts of people, and that so-called, my former hunter friend also told me that. He told me that once when he went hunting, he really went maybe 30 kilometers, 40 kilometers into the jungle, that he came across an open field, or a small open field that was completely clean. There were no leaves on it, there was nothing on it. It was literally just an open patch of land, and no grass grew there. It was just completely flat sand. The terrain was completely flat. Keep in mind, this is a mixed jungle. Okay, everything is covered by thick and dense vegetation, but that part is really clean and neat and everything. It's like someone swept and someone just raked the place completely clean. And there were huts nearby that were left behind by previous hunters, of course, and and he said that he took up refuge in one of those huts and he went to sleep, and he heard a woman crying or similar nearby. And the following day he came across a bush Negro individual that asked him whether he saw that girl. And what he said was along the lines of, "Did you see that girl? She sometimes also fucking bothers me. I don't like her, but yeah, there's nothing I can do." This is someone that lived nearby in an abandoned shack. This was basically like an individualistic tribes member, and that's when he heard my hunter friend heard the story of exactly why he heard that girl crying. That tribes member or that bush Negro individual simply explained to him that it was a bush Negro girl that keeps the place clean, or specifically her spirit, and she sometimes terrorizes nearby residents by coming into their houses without permission and just taking stuff and causing all kinds of havoc and pulling all kinds of shenanigans, just displaying mischievous behavior. And she's the one that keeps that entire area clean because that's her space, according to her, and she sweeps and reeks the entire place clean to the point where you can't even find a single leaf. You can't even find one single leaf on it. And he says that the reason that bush Negro girl is there is because she did something horrible, or some horrible misfortune befell her, and she just couldn't take it anymore, and she hung herself at a nearby tree. And that's why that place is the way it is. So yeah, that is another example of an entity with generally malicious intentions, and yeah, those are simply things to keep in mind. Honestly, I would love to go hunting, I'm not going to lie, and I'd also love to encounter stuff like that, me being who I am, no worries whatsoever. I love to encounter stuff like that, me being who I am. The only reason I don't hunt, I love firearms, I love nature. I mean, for me, hunting would be a blast. The only reason I don't go hunting is because I am not going to kill an innocent animal just for the sake of sport. I despise and utterly despise hunting for sport. Hunting game for sport, nah. I mean, I'm of the opinion if you go hunt something, you should eat it. Don't kill anything that you don't intend on consuming or using directly. But that's the only reason I don't go hunting. And I've been into the jungle a couple of times. I know that it's no cookie, okay? It's no walk in the park. It is From a distance, if you see pictures or if you see videos, it looks nice. But when you actually go into the jungle, it wears you down pretty quick. Okay, fatigue starts to set in. Fatigue starts to set in on that same day. So imagine staying in the jungle for a week. It really wears you down mentally as well as physically. So astrally as well as physically. And yeah. Otherwise, I know for sure that I would have encountered more than my fair share of spirits. But me being who I am, these spirits can't touch me. So yeah, more or less. So I'm not worried. I happily look forward to any spirit. And yeah, other miscellaneous stories that I can tell you guys are that, you know, for example, forest spirits or jungle spirits that also mask themselves like deer or like snakes, as I explained to you. These animals or these so-called animals, quote-unquote animals, will also display odd behavior. I mean, I have heard unconfirmed reports of, for example, if a forest spirit that manifests as a deer, if you threaten that spirit by taking aim with the intent of shooting it, that it will briefly talk. It will say something along the lines of, "Please sir, don't shoot me." And imagine that this is pure speculation, but imagine seeing something like that. You know, you're a hunter, you're in the jungle, you see a deer, you intend on shooting it, and all of a sudden that deer looks at you, and it just goes like this: "Please sir, don't shoot me." And that's all it says. I mean, you'll literally just be I mean, your jaw will fall wide open. I personally, I would love to experience stuff like that, and I would love to document stuff like that. I mean, I have a GoPro camera, so that captures everything in HD. So yeah, there would be no escaping it. But yeah, I already said why I don't go hunting. Let's see. Last but not least, I'm going to close off this segment with my own story, something that I experienced personally, and you can look in the description below. I'm going to add that link. I didn't show anyone this. This was around the same time that I covered an article called Haunted Locations. The reason I wrote that article is because of what happened. And long story short, it involved me going to a resort a few months ago, a month or two ago. It's a local resort which I'm not going to call by name, but this resort is it's still under construction. The owner of the resort has built a so-called event hall and a few huts here and there, but nothing really substantial. The place still needs a lot of work, and you come across the place when going into an alleyway starting at the main road. I'm sorry, hold on. Yeah, I'm sorry. I just ignore the ringtone notification. Yeah, starting at the main road, and there is simply a pathway that already looks a bit dark and unfriendly or malevolent. A pathway of maybe 50 meters. It leads 50 meters into that resort. And I went there with my default cab driver, the guy that I'm used to going places with, or the guy that I'm used to taking a cab with. I've known him for years. It's a black guy, an elderly gentleman, and we came across that place, and I went into a part of the jungle. If you click on the link in the description, you'll see what I'm talking about. I'm going to insert that specific part. And I went into a part of the jungle, a part of that resort, which, like I said, it's still under construction. It's basically still a good patch of land, a good patch of jungle or forest, and there are simply these small narrow pathways like corridors that either lead into a wide open area that's used for farming purposes or that is going to be used for farming purposes. And yeah, I went there, and my cab driver didn't want to come with me. I think because his intuition was also telling him to not go. And yeah, the place looked scary right off the bat. I showed this to a couple of people, and they were like, looks like a portal almost into a different dimension. And I went there, and immediately when I went there, I could sense everything in the air, an unsettling feeling. I mean, the entire resort has an unsettling feeling. But the second that I enter that location, that resort has that part has an extra unsettling feeling. And I looked around, and the entire place just screams horror movie. Everything is so dark. It's dark in an unnatural way. I mean, you can feel the tension in the air. You can feel the negative astral energy in the air. And there's nothing there. There are only a couple of crickets there, but no other animal is present there. And the roots of the trees that are there, are twisted and contorted in a weird and unusual way. And I felt spiderwebs hit my face 3 times, like plop, 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 literally. I was like, oh God, my suspicions have been confirmed. I already suspected that the area was haunted based on what I was seeing, but yeah, now it's confirmed. And that's when I saw 3 slaves in front of me. And these slaves tried to harm me. That's what those spiderwebs meant. Spiderwebs, I already did a video on this called Why Spirits Are Nocturnal and the occult significance of feeling spiderwebs in your face and whatnot. In any case, in this context, it simply meant that those slaves tried to attack me. But those slaves were malevolent, they were unfriendly. That's why they're the ones haunting that location, and that's why the area is so, unfriendly from a mentality perspective. And when they saw that they couldn't hurt me, they tried to hurt me, but when they saw that they couldn't hurt me, and they saw my Cairo energy, they saw this, not literally this, but they saw the astral equivalent of my Cairo energy. They immediately became subservient, and they were completely friendly, and they were ready to serve me at any given moment. I went out back, and everything there is completely quiet in an unnatural way. That's the thing about haunted locations too. If you go into nature and a location is haunted, usually it is quiet in an unnatural way. Things are too quiet. We're talking about you don't even hear birds chirping, you don't hear anything, not even maggots on the ground or in the soil. It's simply too quiet. It doesn't have to mean that the place is automatically haunted, but that is one of the trademarks of a haunted location in nature, usually speaking, that is haunted. In any case, I simply went out back, and after a while I simply left. I went back out in front, and I left with my cab driver. And it was when I left, after a while, maybe an hour or so, I briefly asked him whether he noticed anything about the place. And I asked him, did you notice anything about the place? But he wants to hear it from me. I have to drag it out of him. He's hesitant out of fear, partially, to say something. And I told him, did you notice anything about the place? And he was like, what do you mean? And I'm like, my reaction is, the place is haunted. And he was like, yeah, I know. I sensed it the second we arrived there. I didn't want to say anything because, the elderly teach you that locals here usually, I've already said this in a previous video, locals here teach their children, or they did, people that were born back in the 40s and 50s. The elderly taught them that whenever they come across some spirit, or whenever they sense that a location is haunted, they're not supposed to say anything, because the norm was that if you do say something, as in, hey, this place is haunted, you openly state that you openly acknowledge that you know what's going on, that usually these spirits will harm you severely. In the worst case, they can outright kill you. And that's why he didn't tell me anything. He said he didn't want to say anything because he didn't want to jinx it, because that's what the elderly back in his day taught him. They taught him that he shouldn't just open his mouth, he should keep quiet, and only after a while is he free to discuss the matter, when he's already left the location. And I just told him that, hey, I went out back there, and that location where I went out, that place there are 3 slaves there. These slaves are haunting the location. That's why there's such an intense atmosphere in the air. That's also why you don't see any wild animals nearby. You don't see anything. Everything is eerily quiet. Not even birds go near those trees. Birds don't go near that immediate area or vicinity. And I left the place, and I could feel my astral body burning slightly. It felt a bit like a brief burning sensation in the back of my head. And I told them, I feel a slight burning sensation in the back of my head. Usually I get that when someone tries to cast a spell on you or tries to curse you or harm you in any astral way or in any magical way. These three slaves tried to attack me, but they noticed that they couldn't attack me. And when they saw who I was, they immediately became subservient. And yeah, that's pretty much it. So that's how I'm going to close off this segment with. As you can see, the video is a lengthy video, but out of necessity. I don't like shooting long videos, FYI, but yeah, sometimes it's simply unavoidable. In any case, that's all. See you guys the next time. Bye.